My parents' generation were generally a generation that sort of trusted the doctor and trusted the medical health professionals, whereas I think, thinking about sort of the younger people in the building and construction industry, they'll get their advice from social media. Mm-hmm. And we all know the challenges with that. It may be a really reliable source, but it may also be a bit dodgy.
Welcome to Building Perspective, the Master Builders SA podcast. I'm your host, Will Frogley. Join me as I speak with some characters in the building and construction industry.
Sleep in, did ya?
Whether you're just starting out
Jeez, no worries.
or you're about to knock off, it's good to know that your money is still on the job.
You in that caravan.
Cbus Super, making hard work pay off.
It's been an absolutely frenetic couple of years. The industry's been extremely busy, but many builders I speak to and subcontractors, people who have been in the game 20, 30, even 40 years, tell me they've never seen the industry like it has been over the past couple of years. They've never seen pressure to this degree. So we thought it would be pretty timely today to bring in Ruth Walwyn, who's a psychologist from EML, just to discuss some of the pressures in the industry and the psychological toll that that's taking a lot of people and how to best address that. So Ruth, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Will. Good to be here.
So Ruth, it has been a crazy period, hasn't it? And it's definitely stressing out a lot of people in the industry.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel it's timely to be here because we know there's a lot happening with the increase of mental health injuries over the past few years. I mean, COVID has been a factor in this, but it's particularly useful this morning, I think, to talk about this because the Master Builders Association have taken a really good mental health initiative by introducing the RISE program. And we know that early intervention, anything that helps education of the workforce, supervisors and so on, we know that these sorts of things make a big impact on people's awareness of mental health problems and how to manage them. So, yeah, be interesting to talk about some of the factors that have influenced this sort of increase. And so, I mean, certainly COVID was one of those factors, but particularly for your industry, we know that that's had an impact on people's sense of isolation, working remotely, and then we know in turn that can increase, mental health problems and potentially substance abuse issues as well. We also know that you've got a lot of small business owners you look after in your industry. We know that the pressure on business owners and all their staff in terms of meeting deadlines, meeting budgets and so forth. And you think about a supervisor out there on the job and he's got a worker who might be struggling with mental health problems. What does he do? He's trying to learn some new procedures and processes, and it's easy for people to get stressed and then maybe not communicate with their staff as well as they could. And then a worker goes off and unbeknownst to anyone else around him, he's really struggling. So we know that things like RISE really help in, awareness and supporting people at that early stage with mental health problems. I think it's fairly well known these days that the building and construction industry is sort of overrepresented for suicide. And so things like RISE are fantastic in terms of, I think you have mental health ambassadors out there who can provide immediate support. They can provide the workers who are sort of experiencing those mental health problems, but also maybe support the supervisors and the managers to say, hey, look, maybe you need some support or extra training to help you work in this space. So we also know that, alongside the isolation, we've got, an vastly increased social media influence these days. Mm-hmm. My partner and I have a bit of a joke about this. He doesn't like social media at all, and yet some people, as we know, are really dependent on it. And so you see Joe from our work site or construction site has posted a message on Facebook. People reading it have got no context. They think, what's going on here? And before you know it, you've got potentially World War III escalating and misunderstandings, breakdown in communication. I mean, all of these things go to the uptick in psychological claims, and psychological injuries at the workplace.
Absolutely. So there's probably a lot of people listening to this podcast who aren't really familiar with the RISE program. So the background to RISE really is Master Builders were pretty concerned about people's mental health, particularly coming out of COVID. we discussed that with Andrea Michaels, who's the responsible minister, if there was anything we could partner with the state government to deliver. Now, at Master Builders, every day we're hearing from members in distress. So we know what kind of issues come up regularly. So we feel like we know what the key pressure points are. So we devised this program called RISE, where we basically are trying to address these issues before they become much bigger issues where perhaps Mates in Construction would be required. And we are partnering with Mates in Construction as part of this program. So all the ambassadors know to refer people to Mates. But we're trying to address those problems, get on top of those key trigger points before they get bigger. And some of the key trigger points we think are, the financial stresses of running a business, work-life balance that's suffering in the building construction industry. It's a well-paid industry, but long hours, pressure's the norm. Pressure coming back from injury or illness, being a female in a male-dominated industry and some of the challenges there, being an Indigenous person in construction. We've got ambassadors in all these different areas. So the way the program works is that anyone employed in building and construction in South Australia can go to the website, which is rise.mbasa.com.au. They can check out all the ambassadors that we've got, and you basically just pick the ambassador, the coach who you think is best placed, has the experience and skill set to help you with your circumstances. So it's not a one-size-fits-all program. So you can go on the website, you can book a free one-on-one session. It's a great resource. We've got some great people involved, and we just want to get the word out there.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. If my experience in this space has taught me anything, we know that the longer a problem goes on, the more it builds up in someone's head. And so if someone's struggling, often they're kind of running a bit of a movie in their head about really significant. And once it reaches that point, that's when people are far more likely to take time off work. I also like the fact that you've got people who have got specific skills. We need, I guess that sounds like the concept of buddying someone. If someone goes off work and they're really struggling, if they haven't got a family member or friends to talk to, then who do they reach out to?
That's right.
It's not necessarily the supervisor. It's someone with a particular approach or particular knowledge that can reach out. And it doesn't have to be a rocket science conversation. It's just like, how are you going? Haven't seen you for a while. And let's talk about what we can put in place. So I guess to use a sort of a simple analogy, you've then got maybe a small ripple or a small wave to deal with, rather than a big tsunami of problems coming at you. And that's both for the men and women and people sort of experiencing the problem, but also the people they work with. Everyone generally is doing their best in these situations, and they just need more resources and more help. So that's sounding fantastic. You've gone that step further in making it a really individualised, sort of tailored program of support. Yeah, sounds great.
It's a great program, and like I said, we've got some really good people involved. The other part of RISE is all the ambassadors and all the MBA staff have had mental health first aid training as part of the RISE program. So
Excellent.
We're all trained on how to deal with those situations where someone is in distress, which is very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very important. So, some of the people we've got, we've got Ryan Gazzard to help people with financial stresses. He knows, having worked with a number of well-known residential building companies, he knows the current climate in terms of the pressure on residential builders in particular. We've got Chris Blows, who is an ex-apprentice of ours, who can help people come back to work from injury. He's, of course, the lad who was a victim of shark attack.
I am familiar with his story.
Yeah,
yes.
amazing guy. Yeah. So we're really trying to line up expert coaches. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about you hand-selecting someone who you really think has probably been in similar shoes to you before and knows the issues well.
And without wanting to stereotype, because we know we do have we have more females out in the workforce as well. We know, I think I can say this, that some men or some business owners will be reluctant to reach out for help. And if you look at the rate of change, technological change, the social adjustments that have been required through COVID, it's easy to see how someone going into a new role in a construction industry business would potentially feel out of their depth and feeling like, I've got to get off on top of paperwork or my admin, and I feel I'm floundering. And I've also got to try and look after my home life, look after my family, look after my kids. So it's that general rate of change, and I think you've got a little sort of microcosm of it in the building industry to deal with.
Yeah, we're a male-dominated industry, and we've always been a hardy bunch. But there's absolutely no shame in reaching out for help. I mean, you should really just think of it as a coach. There's no a coach can help you get better.
Yep, absolutely. And I think often people, when they're thinking about psychological injuries, they're thinking, or psychological problems, it's all some sort of vague, mysterious thing that happens in the head. But there's a lot of science now to explain the linkages between, brain and body. When people have anxiety or depression, they don't just have, different things happening mentally, but they experience changes in their body. And so sometimes talking to someone who can help you get back into your daily routine, whether that's, physical exercise or so it doesn't all have to be, in-depth talk therapy, but I guess that's where your ambassadors and coaches, dare I use that old one of if your car's not working, you take it to the mechanic.
Yeah.
So if your brain and body aren't working, those coaches are invaluable in terms of, helping people to, find something that works for them. So, it could be, without talking too much about EML, we're a big believer in the value of exercise and physical activity at an early stage. When we get stressed and we get that tunnel vision, which is a common thing across all types of conditions, people's normal routines go out the window. They say, oh, I'm too stressed or I'm too tired. I'm too tired to go to sleep. Now, how is that for a problem? Or I'm too tired to go, go to the gym or go out to my soccer match or catch up with friends. And so that's
definitely a real warning sign, is it? When you see people who are normally very energetic, very motivated, if suddenly they seem lethargic, that's a really bad warning sign, isn't it?
Yeah, warning sign. So you look for any change. Like if you've got, a lady, Cheryl, who's usually really, really outgoing and becomes quite to herself, withdrawn, those are important early warning signs. But also if you notice someone who's usually fairly quiet and suddenly becoming quite out there and extroverted, you might be thinking, what's going on there? That's actually a bit unusual. But not anyone can have those conversations with someone, and not everyone has a regular GP or wants to go to see their GP. They'd actually like to have someone who they're familiar with to just have that door opening conversation. Yeah.
Ruth, there's a lot more awareness about mental health issues these days.
There is.
And people are far more likely to be able to talk about it. This spike we're seeing in mental health issues, do you think it's because more people are coming forward, or do you think it's related to just the modern world in general, how fast-paced it is, technology being in your face all the time, drugs? What is actually, is it, what do you think is going on here?
Well, I think you've highlighted three of the major factors there. I think it's a different combination of things for different people. For some people, certainly if they're speaking to a friend, that can be helpful. But if you've got a friend who's got, the best remedy, or they think they've got the best remedy for the problem, go down to this clinic and they'll sort you out. So I think there generally is a much stronger awareness that mental health problems are a real thing. They're not imagined. But also you can have a case of a little knowledge is dangerous. So, your mate John's solution for his depression or alcohol problems, whatever they are, is not necessarily going to be right for you. And I think that sort of short grab of information that we're in at the moment, people might see something on Facebook and say, oh, that looks really good. And I'm desperate. I need to try something, so I'll just go and try that and see if it works. So, and perhaps generation-wise as well, my parents' generation were generally a generation that sort of trusted the doctor and trusted the medical health professionals, whereas I think, thinking about sort of the younger people in the building and construction industry, they'll get their advice from social media. And we all know the challenges with that. It may be a really reliable source, but it may also be a bit dodgy. So make sure you're checking out that source of information. So I think looking for help is a good thing, but I guess you want to also be speaking to people like your coaches, your wellness ambassadors, to just check out, whether that is something that's going to be helpful. And I think when people get anxious or depressed, they can also get a bit overwhelmed and don't necessarily solve those sorts of problems all that well. They'd just be looking for the next best, easiest thing. And it's far better to maybe just take an hour out and talk to someone who is at least qualified, who has the basic mental health first aid training to talk about, what are the options that are there. So, yeah, but it's a really sort of complex area, and I think it's all underpinned by this sort of rate of change. I know that we have a thing now called bullying and harassment. Once again, we need to understand what that's about. In some instances, people are talking about maybe a minor disagreement of starting times at the workplace, and you've got that to all sort of shades in between that to a real full-on conflict, or where someone has been physically assaulted. So we have these terms, these emotive terms out there that people can latch onto, but you need to actually drill down and say, well, what was that about? So what was really going on in that situation? Was it just a breakdown in communication? And to the RISE program, the sooner you get on top of that, or the sooner you identify that, the less likely you are to have a sort of a black and white rigid approach. I only want to work with this person, or I only want to work in these circumstances. And finding that, you can end up in a bit of a Mexican standoff. Mm-hmm. So that early intervention really helps to address that.
Ruth, you mentioned social media before. Now, I'm not a medical profession, but for me, the rise in social media can, in parallel with the rise in mental health issues, is just blindingly obvious. And, I read articles all the time about how lonely young people are these days, but they've never been more connected. But it's just what I'd call junk food interaction. Now, I remember when I was probably, how long ago was it? It was probably about 10 years ago. I deleted my Facebook because I was wanting to focus on completing my MBA whilst working full time, and I thought I was wasting too much time on it.
Right.
And I could see firsthand the massive benefits to my mental health of not having social media. Where now it's hard. Like, you can't run a business these days without having a social media presence. But if you're not making money out of social media, most of the time it's just wasted time, isn't it? Think of the opportunity cost.
Well, exactly. I think that there's a lot of social media that is about image and how to influence people's behaviour by these sort of short grabs of, look at me, I'm wonderful and amazing, therefore if you do what I do, your life will be sort of superbly wonderful. But I think the biggest problem, one of the problems with social media, is that you're only seeing one dimension of a person. And, you might be getting information through what you see, but you don't really have a whole sense about that person. And I think that's where the isolation and loneliness comes in. And so people are making judgments about choices they should make on the basis of something that's really, superficial, on the basis of maybe, someone whose main claim to fame is, look at where I bought my last cup of coffee or my last outfit. Yeah. Therefore, if I follow that person, so I guess we're overgeneralising to make a point. You only get one dimension ever on social media. It doesn't tell you anything about what else is going on in that person's life, and I think we also then miss out. You probably found that you gained a lot more. Your life became more enriched when you. As does mine.
Your productivity goes through the roof as well compared with the average person if you don't waste time on social media.
Yes, exactly. And it's there and it's too convenient sometimes.
There's no doubt that whether it's personal connections, business connections, professional connections, they're much stronger if you have those in-person relationships rather than just online.
Exactly.
There's no doubt in my mind. The other thing you touched on there, which I thought was pretty interesting, was bullying and harassment. Now, true bullying and harassment, I don't condone in any way, shape or form, but, I think there's a lot of frustrated bosses out there these days that you basically pay someone to do a job.
Exactly.
And if they're not doing the job as you paid them to do and you pull them up on it, then suddenly you're told that's bullying and harassment.
Absolutely.
They're not really the same thing, are they?
No, absolutely. And I guess to just clarify that point, it is a term that's sort of thrown around a lot and people put it out there. I'm suffering from, it's like it's a condition, and it's not even a condition. I think the challenge for bosses and supervisors, they're dealing with a very busy workplace, and they may have, several people to supervise, and a slight change in the way that they communicate a message to a worker. If that worker is feeling vulnerable or having their own problems, there's a misunderstanding about that message. And so the next day, it's a bit of a head-scratching moment for the supervisor. Jay's gone off because he felt you bullied and harassed him yesterday. And that is why, I guess, getting people together, something that we look at with EML, getting people together to deal with these little breakdowns in communication. And so absolutely, there are challenges for people, running the workplace, leading hands, supervisors, as well as the workers. But I think when you've got a mental health program in place, which is sort of more around education and prevention, people become better at understanding their own warning signs and maybe thinking, listen, maybe I overreacted to that. Maybe I'm not just reacting to the way the boss spoke to me. Maybe I'm also reacting to other things. So maybe I need to take some responsibility as well. So I think it's about sharing of that responsibility.
That's a very good point, because I think the concept of, personal or self-responsibility isn't emphasised the way it used to be. And it's a lot easier to blame someone else if things aren't going your way. But
Correct.
It's a lot harder to, actually properly reflect and look in the mirror and ask yourself, honestly, have I contributed to myself being in this situation? And that's why a lot of people will take the former option. Absolutely.
Because I think you'll find over the next couple of years that as RISE continues to roll out and get some good results, people become more resilient. They develop a better set of coping skills, and they're more able to deal with problems in a sort of a matter-of-fact way, rather than making it this sort of bigger than Ben-Hur problem. So resilience is something that, as a psychologist, we know is really important. Learning how to develop better self-awareness and look after yourself very well or better.
Absolutely. It's good to have good people around you, but at the end of the day, you have to take control of your own life. If you don't like some part of it and you want to change it, you have to take the reins, don't you?
Correct, yeah. And I think some people will recognise that, and they kind of get into this, look, I'll just sweep it under the carpet. I'll see how I'm going in 3 months. And then 3 months comes along and they end up having to go to the doctor because things have worsened, rather than going out and seeking help. The moment you notice some of those early warning signs, we touched on some of them before, but you can also have, sleeping problems, and relationships at home are getting a bit stressed. Then those are all signs or times to reach out and get support. There are also others who, if they're working remotely, I would still say that these days there are better supports around, even if there aren't a lot of friends or family reaching out and getting supports to help you take better care of yourself, rather than isolating yourself at home and, getting angry and annoyed and blaming the entire world around you for all of your problems.
Yeah. That's a really good point there, because when people are going through tough times, I think most people want to kind of go into their shell a bit and stay at home.
Correct.
But being isolated actually exacerbates the problems, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And so that's something that we look at very carefully. And I know that any mental support program for any industry, but I guess looking at construction industry where you do have people working remotely, it really becomes important to look at those sort of supports. In some places in Australia, I know they're setting up, it's like a regional bus trip that an organisation might do. It's like the travelling bus that goes around and supports people who don't actually have good access to those good regional mental health supports. So, if they can access those earlier, but it's encouraging them. And I think people need to feel like, hey, it's normal. We all struggle. You know, we all have problems that we struggle with from time to time, and getting the support at the right time is, really the important thing.
Ruth, it's been great to have you on the podcast today.
It's been my pleasure.
Anyone listening, please check out Rise. Please help us spread the word. rise.mbasa.com.au. It's a free service for everyone in the building construction in South Australia to access. Why wouldn't you?
Indeed. Get out there and engage. Find someone to speak to if you need to.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ruth, for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining me on Building Perspective. For more information on master builders or our guests, please visit our website at mbasa.com.au.